On a resume, they look for folks that are doing continuous education. If they see someone's resume that comes across their desk and they're maybe out of a job for the last 6-8 months, but they haven't seen any like additional learning or skills or kind of growth in the last year, it's like, well, what have they been doing? Like, so many things in cyber change every 2 to 3, 6 months that it's a continuously learning career.
Cybersecurity looks like the golden ticket right now. High salaries, endless job postings, and everyone's saying that there's a talent shortage. But here's the truth. Most people who try to break into this field are hitting a wall. They spend thousands on certs, send out hundreds of resumes, and still can't manage to land that first role. That's why today I'm bringing back Andrew Crotty. He's a cyber warrant officer in the Army Reserves. He's worked for the Department of Homeland Security, and today he's a senior security analyst at a huge financial institution. On top of that, he helped run the new village at DEF CON this year, a space dedicated for helping beginners get their first taste of cybersecurity in a hands-on, approachable way. Andrew has seen cybersecurity from every angle: military, government, corporate, and now in the community. And in this conversation, we're cutting through all the noise and sharing what you actually need to know before getting started in cybersecurity, the mistakes to avoid, the skills that actually matter, and the real strategies that will get you hired. So with that said, let's roll into this week's episode. Welcome to the show, Andrew. It's great to have you back today.
It's so good to be back, Dakota, and it was awesome getting to catch up with you and actually meet in person for the first time, which I'm sure we'll meet more, at DEF CON this year. It was great.
Yeah, DEF CON was such an experience. It was so much fun. I kind of regret not being able to hang around the new village some more and stuff, but it was a really cool time.
Just like you kind of mentioned with the initial intro, it's just there's so much going on right now in job hunts and folks trying to break in and understanding the environment we're in right now for the job culture and kind of job procedure of breaking in. I think this video is going to be a lot of strong talking points that folks are really going to get attached to once we're done with this conversation.
Well, diving right on in, speaking of all the hype around cybersecurity careers, from your perspective, what do you think beginners are getting wrong when they're looking to break into that first cybersecurity job?
It's funny because I'm part of my DC 4.0 group here locally in Arizona. And there was a short article that one of my colleagues posted where it's like, you have college students that are using AI to generate their resumes and their cover letters. That's then going against your place of work you're trying to get into, their AI that's looking for AI generated resumes and cover letters, that then no one is getting interviews and no one's getting pulled for kind of any type of like job placement or even like a first round interview. So the one thing I think that's kind of sort of happening is a slight reliance on AI too much and not enough of the human factor. So just like you and I probably did this back when we were initially starting off or maybe pivoting to a new role, doing that research, understanding the company you're trying to go to, what their goals are, what their priorities are, and actually taking your time to craft a strong cover letter and resume that meets all those requirements and that you're actually a strong fit for. And then doing your homework, doing your research when you do get that, hey, we'd like to bring you for that first round, looking up who you're talking with, looking up what the organization's goals and values are, and making sure you're coming prepared and being the best candidate for that role. I think certifications and education are just as important. I think many places are still looking for that 4-year degree and maybe a certification here and there. But that's one thing that some folks are missing as well, is they're getting Security Plus, which maybe back 5 years ago was the foundational certification to get in the door for an organization. But we're now at a point in time, I think, where the entry-level position has really become more of I'd almost say mid-level title. Because when any type of entry-level position comes into the organization's pocketbook saying, hey, we need to hire some junior analysts, they don't go to recruiters. They don't have to. They can post a job and within 2 hours, they're going to have over 200 applicants trying to fight for this position. And I think the best thing that people can do to really stand out to these next roles is just making yourself the best candidate, doing your homework on the organization, making a strong and really sturdy foundational resume with cover letters that you're taking your own time to kind of craft rather than using AI. Because by doing that, you're only hurting yourself, fighting against the algorithm when these companies are also using AI for detection to kind of figure out who's the best for this role.
You know, there's a lot of good things that you just unpacked there. And I want to make sure and touch on all of them. But the first thing that really stood out to me, and I think is personally kind of a hot take in the industry, is you said Security Plus doesn't matter anymore. And hopefully I caught that the right way. I'm not twisting your words.
No, you're not wrong. And it's like, no shame or like mud on CompTIA, right? Like I went through the CompTIA, the plethora. I went through the battle logs of all of it up through their Security X. It's great material. It's good information. But the entry-level role, and even talking to Ryan Murray, who's our state CISO here in Arizona, there's so much risk now when it comes into hiring junior analysts for these positions. You have all these compromises. You have ransomware is still up and coming and growing year after year for incidents that are happening. And for young analysts to come into a role, I feel like Security Plus, that used to be that good foundational certification, really is just not cutting it anymore. They're needing an additional advanced level certification to bolster their knowledge if they don't have the actual job experience of working inside of an actual environment. And that's where it comes into like the home labs, the TryHackMe, SOC level 1 certification, Blue Team level 1, the hands-on ones that actually give you lab environments to mess with that allows you to come at those interviews saying, hey, well, what experience do you have? Well, other than my labs I built in school or my home lab, I've also done these certifications that have like live data inside a sim that I actually got to play with and write reports and go through logs and actually do full thorough reports on to make sure I can kind of line up what your company needs. And that's an analyst that's going to be able to do a good, solid investigation.
Now, home labs, I think, are amazing. And I definitely want to touch on that here again in a second. But I want to stay on the certification talk. Certifications are, I think, definitely great. And I think a lot of people put almost too much weight on them. They think, oh, I'm going to get this certification and I'm guaranteed a job. And again, that may have been true. Maybe, I think it was more than 5 years ago. I think about 10 years ago. Maybe 10 years ago, you got a certification. There's a good chance you're going to get a job. But certification is no guarantee. The best it's going to do for you, I feel like, is open up a door to that job interview. You know, it's going to get you past those HR screening filters, those AI filters, and say, okay, I want to interview this person. And, you know, that's all it's going to do for you. It's going to be up to you to get that job. And that's what I also worry, that AI is maybe like, you know, we're using AI to create resumes and stuff, like you mentioned. Is that possibly setting up false pretenses? You know, is that actually holding us back as well?
It is and it isn't. So I'll be the first one to say that I use AI on my day-to-day life. I'll use it to help summarize articles. I'll use it to maybe strengthen certain email responses or even resume bullets if I need a stronger, maybe like overall arcing summary of like what my skills can really entail to match to a company. But with that, like just like hallucinations happen within AI, I've also had it try to create me like speaker bios for folks I come on my YouTube channel, and it'll add in like how they're the CISO or they did this specific task solo. And I've had to read that back with the people I've talked to. Oh yeah, I haven't done that. Like I've never done that. Yeah, I'm not part of that. I'm like, weird. I don't know why AI is trying to say that you did. So I think there's that pro and con to it. And for those that aren't using it on a day-to-day basis and using it for good and understanding how to write a good, strong prompt and how to kind of still have to proofread and ensure that it's not adding in those hallucinations to a resume or to an email response or to like any type of bullets. That's what's going to make you that's how you can use AI in a positive way to spruce up and help make your resume a little bit cleaner or sharper. But I think with that, you're still having to do your homework, if that makes sense.
No, 100%. And I agree. And sorry to kind of jump around here, but also when it comes to like the certification side, how do you figure out, you know, A+ is no longer the go-to certification. How do you figure out what certifications will actually help you get that job interview?
Man, we had a good chuckle before we started with the A+ lingo. First off, CompTIA, please combine the A+ certification as a singular certification. Why you guys make it two, I don't know why, but just make it a singular one, please. I know, we know that's the reason, but
we know, especially, I mean, and I'm not hating on CompTIA either. I think the A+ is a great certification for people that don't maybe have that foundational knowledge, that are looking just to break into tech in general. But yeah, I mean, why is it still Cisco, they combined their CCNA certification down to a single certification now.
Yes.
So yeah.
So circling back to certifications though, right? So it's like how and why to know what certification you need to get into what role. So a lot of questions I get brought to me on some of the mentoring I've been doing is like a lot of GRC compliance folks that want to get into the GRC realm. And they say, hey, what certification should I get to be a GRC analyst? And if you kind of look across in the web or even doing deep dives, like the only GRC certification I can think of off the top of my head is provided through ISC2, which is like their GRC certification that they hold there, which it's entry level, but it's still even in the stats says like you need like 2 to 5 years of like GRC experience and understanding like your basic like security plus information and like terminology, knowledge, that longevity of like maybe being inside an organization doing very entry level compliance work, understanding NIST, FedRAMP, and understanding those processes. That's the best way. And it's honestly just a lot of reading and self-taught or very niche specific tools that offer like vendor specific certifications that are GRC oriented, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. The certification path it's hard. I'd say to a lot of folks like, hey, if you want to be a pen tester, it's great to know blue team skills because you need to understand what those things are doing to the security side when you're actually implementing the red team tools. Vice versa, if you're wanting to be a defense SOC analyst, it's also important to get those blue team tool certifications, but also understanding how a pen test works, what Metasploit's going to pop off. When Mimikatz is ran, what kind of like detections are going to see within your EDR and maybe through your SIM that's going to pop off saying, hey, this bad thing is happening. What do those IOCs look like? So to each their own. I always recommend some folks when it comes to like, I think Hack the Box and Try Hack Me both have like what path do you want to do? Like survey questions that says, oh, you'd be a really good SOC analyst. Here's some training or some certifications that match those kind of goals. And then same thing if it goes into like, oh, you'd be a great pen tester. It pushes like a short list like, hey, here's some pen test certifications that align with those kind of goals of what you're interested in.
Absolutely. And that is, a really valid point is, a lot of people come to me when, they're looking to break in and like, oh, I got to get this certification. I got to get this certification. I got this certification before I even start applying for jobs. And that's just not the case. We see these LinkedIn profiles that have like alphabet soup after their names because they got like 30 certifications. Like I mentioned in the beginning, they spend thousands of dollars on certifications and yet they have no formal experience to back it up. And like for me as a hiring manager, that's a huge red flag. When I see a resume come across my desk and they have like 5 and 10 different certifications, but nowhere in this resume they've talked about their previous work experience or even their like home labs and stuff, because I feel like home labs definitely have a spot on your resume if you don't have prior work experience to help fill that gap.
Definitely.
But I would like your opinion on this whole thing of having too many certifications. What should be on the resume versus, what doesn't belong there.
Yeah. And the way I can talk on resumes, I've sat on interviews as like a senior analyst or engineer on my team. I've yet to be a hiring manager, but talking with my managers and getting to still sit through those interviews and getting to help review resumes, it's one thing that a lot of at least even folks I've talked to on my channel that are hiring managers that they look for is on a resume, they look for folks that are doing continuous education. If they see someone's resume that comes across their desk and they're maybe out of a job for the last 6-8 months, but they haven't seen any like additional learning or skills or kind of growth in the last year, it's like, well, what have they been doing? Like so many things in cyber change every 2 to 6 months that it's a continuously learning career is one thing
100%.
And that's what I tell people too. Like, hey, look, if you hated college and you hate learning continuously, cyber's probably not for you because every 6 months, probably every 2 months, I'm having to go through new CVEs, new tools, new AI integrated tools that they're putting into the current tools I have that cause more headaches sometimes. That's a whole nother talk for that's a whole
nother episode. Yeah. We can do a whole episode about that, but yeah.
But it's having exactly like you said, like if you're lacking the enterprise experience is what most managers and I have talked about. It's, hey, we want to see what you're doing on a home lab. We want to see what you're doing with Try Hack Me. We want to see your GitHub repository. We want to see you bragging on LinkedIn that, hey, I just did this MITRE ATT&CK Defender free training on LinkedIn for a day and got this 12-hour good job certification. But what did you learn from it?
Right.
It's those talking points on the resume that if you can describe, and one of my good friends that was one of my folks that helped me get into this field, I use his story, and I think we talked about it even last time when I was on your channel. He got a GED, self-taught coder. He taught himself Rust, Golang, and C++. And he now works and got a job doing contract work initially with Northrop Grumman. And now he has his like TS clearance. He still has, I think, a GED. He never went to school because he didn't want to. Bless his heart. But got his Sec Plus, his CYSA, some AWS certifications. But he's just so self-taught, proficient on coding for what he needed to do. He met a need an organization needed to fill, and he was the best candidate for it. Oh. So how you correlate that onto your resume is you talk about the projects you did. He talked about all the coding he did. He had a GitHub repository. He had a home lab. When they asked him questions, obviously for those that have been through technical interviews, myself included, where they say, hey, like, we need you to open up a terminal and just like, we're going to ask you to run a command and just run it. And can you explain what it does? He could do that like to the like molecule level. Wicked smart dude.
That's crazy.
And it's being that prepared for those interviews and knowing how to describe that on your resume that's really going to make it stand out if you're missing the enterprise experience. And it's weird because I talk about having a home lab super important. I currently don't have a home lab. It's in the process of being built with one of my buddies and I. But so not saying that it can be skipped over, because I do see, and like when I get to actually talk to people about it, those that can really dive into like the breakdowns of what they're doing with their home lab, how they're, like free source tools they use to like install and what they're detecting and what they're, I also made this like custom honeypot where I every week I jump in to see what attacks are happening on it. That's impressive. And managers and even engineers and analysts like myself, I'm like, hey, that's actually really impressive. Like that's like stuff like our tier 2s are doing and some of our pen test teams do for active like threat enumeration to see what's going on in the network. So, I mean, like to have that kind of skills and you've done it on your own home lab, those are impressive things to talk about.
It's huge.
There's definitely a place for it on your resume.
You know, here's the truth that no one puts on these roadmaps. It's not the CVEs or that fun stuff that drains you. It's the glue work, the 5 portals, the 3 contracts, the meetings you get drugged into trying to figure out who owns this. Meanwhile, the real work, the learning, the automating, the leveling up, all gets pushed to sometime later. That's why I'm excited about what Meter is doing. Instead of having to stitch together a bunch of different vendors, Meter delivers a complete networking stack, wired, wireless, and even cellular in one integrated solution built for performance and scale. This isn't some box reseller. Alongside their partners, Meter designs the hardware, writes the firmware, builds the software, manages deployments, and runs support from the first site survey through ongoing operations. One standard, one playbook, and one place to point when you need answers. What is the stack? ISP procurement, security, routing, switching, wireless, firewall, cellular, power, DNS security, VPN, SD-WAN, and multi-site workflows, just to name a few. So the stuff that usually takes 5 contracts shows up as one solution, and it scales from branch offices and warehouses to large campuses and even data centers, which is huge when your footprint grows. Security-minded takeaways for this is fast, secure, scalable connectivity without the complexity of managing multiple providers or tools, plus the deep controls and visibilities. That's exactly what you want during incidents, audits, or everyday ops. Fewer seams and more signals. If you're the hands-on engineer people call when the internet is slow, this is built for you. The folks who value uptime, control, and tooling that respects your time. Again, thank you to Meter for sponsoring this episode. Go to meter.com/IT career to book your demo now. That is meter.com/IT career to book a demo. Now, back into this week's episode. Really, this doesn't just apply to cybersecurity either, guys. This This applies to networking. This can apply to cloud. This really applies to just the tech industry in general. The value of home labs. People are always like, well, all these jobs out here want multiple years of experience just for an entry-level position. How can you ever get that? The chicken before the egg scenario.
Any chance of getting the eggs before they turn into chickens?
And I'm like, you don't need a job to actually gain the skills and build the experience. You have to have that motivation. You have to have that willingness to learn. But how you actually build experience doesn't have to be on the job. I mean, I have I got two different home labs behind me. I got a networking one over here. I got a server cluster over here. And then I have another one out of my garage. And, I'm not saying go out and buy all this expensive hardware. You don't need that. This is half this stuff is stuff I've just gathered over the years. I went to, my employer was getting rid of some stuff and I'm like, hey, that's going to e-waste. Can I have it? And they're like, sure. We don't care where it goes now. I can personally attest to that too, because, I'm a college dropout. College wasn't for me. And I think college is great for some people, but everyone has their own path into this industry. And for me, it wasn't college. I just could not focus and I wanted to learn. It just wasn't the right environment for me. So I was self-taught. I self-studied and I was still able to land a job in the field because I had a home lab. And during my first interview, I talked about that. And I actually just talked about this in one of my videos I did. At the end of that first video or that first interview, I asked, between now and the next time we meet, is there anything I can do to help make myself a better candidate? And the hiring manager said, well, we use a lot of Cisco Meraki. So if you are interested in learning about Cisco Meraki between now and if we call you back for an interview, that would be super helpful. Matter of fact, you can actually, they had a program back then where you go to sign up for a webinar and they send you free hardware for with a 1 year license. So I didn't even leave the parking lot. I was on my phone already signing up for those webinars. So by the time they called me back for a second interview, the first things I was able to say is, oh, I actually got some Cisco Meraki gear and I've integrated into my home network and I've been doing this cool stuff with it. And later, that hiring manager told me that he pretty much told every single candidate about that, that hack to get that free gear. And I was the only one who actually followed through with that.
Those are called subtle hints, everybody. Subtle hints.
Exactly.
Well, it's funny because it's like I have a mentee I'm talking to right now, and he's wanting to get into project management, but then also possibly now leaning to get into more cyber specific. And he's prior military and he has his VA benefits, but he's contemplating going to this, I'll call it a boot camp, but it's a school allegedly, but $30,000 to get all these certifications. And I'm like, you could do that. Or I'm like, if you just have some good self-motivation, you can sit down and probably pass your Sec Plus in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Right after that, if you do a hard, good study session for probably another week and a half, 2 weeks, you can probably get your CYSA because they really go hand in hand. You can then pivot onto Project Plus. I'm like, that's the thing. Paths are different, right? Some people really need that organized structure, college aspect where there's a professor, you have dedicated deadlines, assignments, essays, there's a punishment or something that happens if you fail to do something, compared to the aspect of, hey, if I just do this on my own, I can do whatever I want.
Exactly.
But some people need that structure because without it, they're never going to get something done. And that's one thing I really press on a lot of my folks I mentor. It's silly. I kind of give homework. I'll say, hey, look, let's link up in 30 days. Here's some challenges I want to have you do. And so I know I was mentoring one person during December last year. I'm like, hey, look, Advent of Cyber is happening here. Try hack me. I want you to do the entire Advent of Cyber. And in January, I want us to link back up on a call and I want to hear your thoughts on what you thought about the Advent of Cyber. And that was the only task I wanted them to do. And crazy enough, on January, he came back and did it. And I'm like, awesome, man. And it's always a good feeling when you give those little, one, it gives you it can show you how dedicated someone is when you give them the advice of hey, look, this is what you should be doing to be successful. It worked for me. It's worked for others I give them the advice to. Doesn't work for everybody, but it's just a way that's going to make you get better. And come back with me the information you're going to get. Try Hack Me's Advent of Cyber. It does such a good job at giving a nice spread too of red team, blue team, GRC, CTI, open source, report writing. So you get to touch a little bit of everything. Crazy enough, 2 months later, he did end up getting a project management job for an MSSP, which made me super happy.
That's awesome.
But yeah, it's ideally just figuring out what's the best way for you to learn is one thing too within this field. And whether that's school, whether that's a boot camp, whether that's self-pace, whether that's joining a cohort, whether that's getting on to, I know you offer also training and stuff with your website, Dakota, for kind of progression, resume review, mock interviews,
Absolutely.
mentorship. Finding what fits best for your schedule and your career is what's going to make you successful and grow. That, and I also just tell people time management, because it took me a year to get into this industry.
So yeah, I definitely want to get back to like the time it takes to actually make this career transition. But one thing I want to ask you is, well, from your perspective, there's school, there's boot camps, there's these learning platforms like TryHackMe. And how do those actually stack up to what you're actually doing in the real world? I know you're a big proponent of like Hack the Box and TryHackMe. And some people say those are wonderful platforms, and some people say those will teach you no usable skills.
That's a really good question. And it's so funny because it's just like, not to bash on school. I'm going to bash on school for a little bit on this one. So it's like,
that's fine.
I went and got my master's in cybersecurity, and specifically for where I went, it was more business continuity, like management. Like my capstone was building out a business continuity plan, which is like a 50-page, like what if, I call it the what if book, because what if this happens? It's all your contingencies of how you're gonna save your company. And I had to make my own MSSP, I had to make a network map and a whole architecture, where all my hosts, my endpoints were, where my servers were, what I was using for defense, and it was great. And then I got into my first job at a SOC, and I used none of it. And I'm like, I learned terminology and verbiage, which was great. And having the educational knowledge I thought was excellent. And that was my intention of going back to school, because my bachelor's degree is in criminal justice. But the thing is, I tell people when it comes to, and this is where I kind of find, and as we mentioned, like CompTIA certifications, SANS certifications, they're great. But the thing is, the real important thing that I think people need to understand when actually getting into a role is learning the tools. We're going to pick on Splunk and Elastic because they're just relatively free trainings that you can have to both those, to include Google Chronicle. And that's one thing I tell people, where it's like, well, I need to get CompTIA Sec Plus and my CYSA, my Project Plus, my Pen Test, my Sec Plus. And it's like, well, you could, but then like you're going to get into a SOC and you're never going to be able to touch a tool because all you know is the knowledge aspect of it.
Right.
Where it's like, go into Splunk or go into Elastic and jump into a ton of their free training on what's a dashboard, what's SQL, how do I go through their logs, how do I write YARA rules for rule detections. And Splunk, Elastic, Google Chronicle, they all have all this free training that just actually will teach you that tool to better yourself. And that's one thing where it's like, once you actually get into a SOC, try TryHackMe and Hack the Box, because they're the two primary platforms I like to mess around and play with. There is excellent training in a few of those rooms that I've used on a day-to-day basis. Like anything Wireshark related to going through like PCAP analysis, fantastic. I love going through that stuff, and TryHackMe has some amazing rooms, to include also Hack the Box. Some of the Splunk trainings as well, we're actually going through logs and having to jump around and write specific queries to look up different date ranges and times, and like to write out an SQL query. That's fantastic. But the caveat is if you only learn Splunk and then you jump into an organization that's like using like Sumo Logic or Elastic or Google Chronicle, the whole query and parameter, like the language could be completely different or not really similar.
Right.
It's similar in its sense, but now you're having to kind of teach yourself a whole new parameter. It's like coding. A lot of folks say, well, once you learn one language, you can learn them all because they all have some similar ticks. But it's like, I would argue that if you learn Python, you're not going to go over to Rust and pick it up like within a day. So that's one thing where I do think some of the training platforms do have excellent rooms that correlate to what it's like to work inside of a SOC. But once you get into your first role, it's really important just to learn the tools and be dangerous in all of them. When I was at the state, I tried to touch as many of the things I could. I won't name the tools.
The secret's safe with me.
But I was about to say, lay out the entire plethora of what the state's using.
Oh my gosh.
I jumped into every team as much as I could for shadowing to learn what the tool did, to at least get like a low level. So like if someone asked me about it, I could say, oh yeah, we use that tool. This is how we use it. This is what it does. And that way I had like just a nice, like I could scratch the surface of it to be enough to go in there and dive through and do like log analysis or review things. That's one thing I would tell people, where it's like, yeah, is there good real life training experience from those training platforms, there is. But not every single room that they drop every week or that people create is going to be like a, man, this was the room that got me into cyber. Because there's some rooms in there that you don't need. So on both platforms.
Completely understandable. And we talked about certifications and their role they play. We've talked about, the resumes and what to put on there, and we're talking about skills. And this next question is kind of a broad one. So it might be a little hard to difficult, but in your opinion, when you're like mentoring someone, what are the very top skills and habits that you see that separate candidates from the ones who land jobs and the ones who are still stuck, not getting that entry level position?
That is a broad question, but it's a really good one. And I think I have a great way to answer it. So it's funny. And I can go back to some stories from when I was at CactusCon this last year. I sat in our career village and got to do some mentorship and resume review with folks. And as silly as it is, like all the resumes we were reviewing, some of these college kids, the projects they were doing, the GitHub repositories they did, their resumes were rock stars. The issue was honestly the soft skills and basic communication. So the STAR method for interviewing, which is like situation, the task, the action, and the result. Going off those, I would ask like, hey, if you were working a project with someone that you didn't get along with, how would you work that project still? And I had this one candidate where it's like, well, I probably just wouldn't talk to him and get the project done. And that was his answer. And it's like, okay. I'm like, and I had to keep it with a straight face. I'm like, well, that's one way you could do it. But I'm like, what that job is looking for your answers, like they're trying to see how you problem solve. Like, so if you're dealing with a colleague that you don't get along with, like they don't want you just to ignore them. Like you still have to work with them for as long as you're there. They want to see like, okay, well, like what is your like analysis? Like, are you going to address the problem yourself? Are you going to go to a manager? Are you going to try to go to maybe another team member and say, hey, can you just sit with me and Kyle and we're going to chat real fast. And just, I want to make sure that I'm not doing something that's causing issues or getting him annoyed with me. Or are you just going to go to a manager? Like they're wanting to see your process for like how you kind of like solve a problem. Same thing with like questions such as like explain the time you've been challenged with a task. And I had this other candidate. It's like, I've never been challenged. I usually pick up stuff really fast. And I'm like, okay, well, that's one way you can answer it. But I'm like, the same process. They're wanting to see your kind of analysis processing skills of what happens when you get stuck on something. Do you just give up? Do you go immediately to a tier 2 and ask for help? Or, hey, do you take a step back? You reanalyze the problem. You do your research. You go to Google, which is your best friend in any SOC or any role. When you don't know something, just go to Google and YouTube and see if it's been created already, because why reinvent the wheel? And you just go from there. Some other things I've seen is kind of just like the lack of self-motivation or self-starters. So just like we said, like being and breaking into cyber doesn't happen overnight. It is not you wake up one night and you read a cybersecurity book and then the next day you have 6 job offers with 100K salaries. I wish it was true. That'd be a great world, but it's not the world we live in. So it's when like you're giving someone a task, like, hey, look, like this is what you need to do. You need to go through and like probably dedicate, you could do 3 days a week, maybe an hour a night or an hour every one of those nights. So 3 hours a week of just, hey, go learn something. And that, whether that be like log analysis, whether that be and go do like a bunch of rooms and try hack me for an hour, go through some study material for studying for certification and actually learn the material. Don't just like brain dump it. And the pushback I get from candidates that do take the time to go and learn the material, get the certifications, get honest, good feedback from both positive and negative interviews. So always reaching out to a place you applied to saying, hey, thank you so much for the time to interview. If they weren't selected, and just ask like, hey, if it's within your policy, could we please set up a follow-up call and can I just talk to your hiring manager and the team to get some feedback on things I could do to make myself better the next time I come across your guys' table? And the folks that have done that have gotten such good feedback. One of my folks said, yeah, they said I was just missing, I think like they wanted more Linux experience. So he simply just went and got his Linux Plus and he learned Linux. And I'm like, perfect. And then next go around when he found like a similar role with a similar job, he got the job. And I'm like, perfect, man. He's like, yeah, like I figured out what I was missing.
It's awesome.
I had a relatively solid rest of the resume, but they said I was just lacking that one piece. As soon as he did that, everything rounded out and it worked out.
That's so cool. And, you know, a lot of people forget to do that whole follow-up stage. You know, it sounds kind of silly, you know what I mean? But it is huge, because every interview you go on should be a learning experience. You should treat it as a learning experience. You should try to improve at least a little bit, like 1% every interview you do. Trying to get that feedback, you know, going. And not every company will give you that feedback, you know.
They won't, yeah.
It can be difficult.
Well, I love the question you said, because I have a similar question I always ask whenever I get like, hey, do you have any final questions before you leave today?
Yeah.
The question I always ask is there anything on my resume that you didn't see that I could expand upon now that was missing? Or hey, is there anything on my resume that's missing that you didn't see that would make me a stronger candidate?
That's a powerful.
Because maybe you have that experience that you just failed to put on your resume, where they're like, oh yeah, you know what? We just thought you were really more into coding, and like, oh, well, I do code. Like, I've done these projects. Here's my GitHub repository. I thought that was on my resume. I apologize, but yeah, let me send that over to you guys real quick. And that could be the deciding factor for that second call, for that second interview.
Those are some powerful tips right there. Now, you know, we've talked about pretty much everything leading up to getting that first job, but the question I always get asked, and I know everyone is itching, is it still possible today to land a job in cybersecurity without like any other, like just jump straight into cybersecurity? No help desk, no networking. Is cybersecurity still a field that you could just jump directly into?
See, I have a mixed answer to this one. So my answer is yes, but it's going to be a uphill battle. So, and it's also going to depend on your organization you're jumping into and how well their onboarding process is. So with my jump into cyber, I've been now with, we'll call it 4 orgs, counting the military I've been in, right? Every organization I've been in has had a pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? Tedious onboarding process that gave a really good granular experience of like from start to finish of what I needed to do to be successful. But the caveat is a lot of those times where it was all self-taught. I would have like a mentor or a buddy that I was assigned that I could ask questions to if I was stuck. But it was kind of like, hey, look, like onboarding takes about 2 months. We're going to put you in this like dev environment. It's going to be a bunch of mock cases. We're going to then kind of slowly work you to that before we actually throw you on prod or production, which is like your live environment that actually is doing the real world stuff. And then what I would do on those situations is I would just go in and like, I would absorb all that training and knowledge and just get into the procedures. And that way I knew like, hey, look, like as long as I follow these procedures and then also add in my root cause analysis, that's my end goal for all these cases. That's my end goal for using these tools. And the more adaptable one can be to jump right into a job role that maybe they've been a stay-at-home parent for a while. They were doing a job hiatus. They went and traveled and they want to get back into the industry. And maybe they do a killer job on an interview and they get that chance from a hiring manager. It can happen. But the caveat is right now, I think within the job market, it's just really rough right now. There's still so many of the job, like the shadow jobs, and it's such you'll get hit up by recruiters for you're the best candidate. You get the resumes and then you just get ghosted, or you'll immediately within like a week or two get the rejection email and they went with an internal hire. It's hard. And that's where I think networking really comes into play of like getting to talk to folks within this organization and maybe within your city or state you're in and going to meetups and making sure that you can kind of find that way in to show people the passion you have into cybersecurity that can help you land that role. So is it possible to go right into cybersecurity and be successful? Yes. However, there's going to be some self-motivation, a good procedure and training platform that you'll hopefully have at that organization, and just asking questions and making sure that you fully understand what you're doing. Jumping into something and like trying to assume that you understand a process half-heartedly will cause errors and mistakes, but that will then possibly get you terminated or written up or put onto a PIP because you thought you knew the processes, but if you're going too fast and not asking those questions at the time where you can at the onboarding process or while you're still in training, once you hit production, that's you're knocking down real servers. You're taking people offline. You're blocking legitimate applications that's causing a whole org to do manual signatures for the entire day. There's a story behind that we'll talk about later. But
No, absolutely. And, I'm curious, in your opinion, what are some of the realistic first jobs that people should be targeting if they're trying to break into cybersecurity?
So the first thing I want people to understand is every job does not have to be six figures. So you can get into state and city organizations for probably a better opportunity than public sector. But the caveat is the pay is probably not going to be that top tier private sector pay. But understanding that like IT help desk, system admins, even SOC analyst level 1 positions are all like brand new first year user friendly, but they may not be at that salary increase that you're going to want. Like even when I left PD, I took a salary decrease to break into cyber, but I knew with my hard work and dedication, I would really invest in myself to make sure I could get back into where I needed to be at a healthy salary point to take care of my family. So I just tell people to be open to certain roles and be open to growing within that network. So
Absolutely.
We've talked before, Dakota, where it's like all because you get into some one specific organization doesn't mean you have to stay there for 20 years. At the end goal, that's always the goal. But I mean, like I have a colleague of mine right now that's been in a company for about 6 months, but he's already looking to jump because he's mastered a lot of the skills. He's asked kind of what if there's any kind of growth opportunities there at the organization, and there's not. So now he's looking to do that next role. And the roles he's looking for is about 40 to 50K more of what he's already making. And he's only been at that organization for 6 months as a senior analyst. So,
but unfortunately, that's kind of what you have to do in this industry. If you want to go after those big bucks, you kind of have to do that job hop to be able to scale up because, gone are kind of the days of staying in within an organization and getting these big raises. It does happen. And I'm one to talk because I, 2 times I've gotten at 2 different organizations, I've gotten, $10,000 plus raises, in a single year. So, I mean, it happens. And that's even without a promotion too, is the thing. But if you really want to make the big bucks, because let's be honest, there is money to be made in cybersecurity if you're willing to chase after it. But you're going to have to do the job hop. And that's a whole nother topic for another day, is like how to make those big dollars, because that gets really difficult. I feel the higher up that ladder you get, because you kind of start getting niched off into these specialties, and that's definitely not a beginner's conversation though.
Yeah, that'll be a more mid-level advance. Like, hey, you're ready to make your first career hop to your other org. How long should you stay there? Because just like you said, like the money's in cyber, but you have to get, once you've learned the skills that the organization you need, the next question you need to ask yourself is, one, is there growth where I'm currently at, or do I need to look elsewhere to grow? And sometimes your organization wants you to stay because you're a valued team member. You carry the weight, you're a killer on metrics, but a good manager is going to understand that if you're looking for that next position for growth and that they don't have it, they're going to support you finding that next role. And that's one thing that the state did for me leaving for Wells Fargo. They knew I was a sharp cookie and that I was going to get headhunted. And I unfortunately did, but my manager was so supportive about it and gave me great advice and actually told me to take the role. And he was more impressed because he's like, look, Andy, what that tells me is that I'm such a good manager and I'm turning out such strong engineers and analysts that's the type of SOC we have. And he had some rock stars still there, so I didn't feel super bad. I got one of my buddies on that was easily doing double the work I was, so I left him in good hands. But yeah, having supportive management and supportive team members to help you kind of lift you up and not hold you down is also super important in this like role and kind of business we're in.
100%. When I first got into tech, that was kind of my path is, I went the networking route. I'm a networking guy, but I knew the easiest way to get in was through the help desk. And so many people hate on the help desk, but it is in all honesty, I feel it's like the easiest stepping stone to break into really any sector of tech. And the thing is, I knew I wasn't going to be on the help desk forever. My goal was 1 to 2 years at the help desk and then slowly progress into my next career. And that's exactly what I did. I went from the help desk. I was there for almost exactly 2 years. I left for a network engineering position. It was at a school district that I absolutely hated the politics. I went from a really great family-owned company, had an amazing boss, one of the best bosses I've had, and I went to this really toxic environment.
This whole situation is toxic.
So I was only there for about 6 months, and then I left there for a position as a network operations center technician and had an amazing boss there, and then ended up getting promoted up to a director level role at that company. And, you know, every job role served a purpose in my career path. And that's what I'm trying to get at is sometimes, yeah, it might not be the glamorous cybersecurity job you want, but it's the job that you're building experience, you're gaining knowledge from the people, and you're getting built up to take that next position. And, you know, we talked about this, you know, jumping straight into cybersecurity. While it's possible, it is definitely a huge uphill battle. And I think the other path is to start in a non-cybersecurity role, building experience that can translate into a cybersecurity job. And that path, while I think it'll take a little bit longer, is, I feel, 10 times easier to do. But everyone has their own journey into this career field.
Absolutely, Dakota. And it's a nail on the head. It's like my law enforcement experience, like, as odd as it was, made me really, I'd say, solid at my investigations of just asking why, doing solid reports, being able to break down and write a solid story of like who, what, when, why, where, and taking my experience into report writing for talking to a judge and jury to then talking to C-suite level and folks that are not cyber and not understanding what happened to break down an event that happened. So everyone has different paths, just like as we talked about during this talk. And I think whether it's going through school, self-taught, getting your GED, joining the military, maybe going an untraditional path into cybersecurity, there's thousands of different ways and avenues to get into this field. And the easiest way is just do the best way that fits your lifestyle, that fits your journey.
Now, as we start to land the plane here, you touched on networking with people. And I know to many people that seems really intimidating, especially when you're just starting out. But I want to hear from your opinion again. How important is networking? You know, I see it all the time. I feel that sometimes in tech, it's not what you know, it's who you know. But I'm curious on your opinion on how can networking with people help land an actual job? So
it's funny. I'm actually going to be doing a video here soon on my channel of how I got to go to DEF CON for free from networking. And it's wild because just by even doing my YouTube channel and getting to talk to folks like you, Dakota, and Tyler and Josh, it's opened up so many doors and avenues for me to go to online conferences, go to real conferences, being part of New Village this year. I got to go there for free. And it's because of getting the contact folks within this in this community we live in cyber, and just kind of share my story of how passionate I am about helping folks break into this industry and why I enjoy the job I do, and wanting to kind of just help others kind of understand their journey or where they belong trying to break into cyber. And so I tell people when it comes to networking, it's huge. Being able to walk into a room and just maybe challenge yourself to like, you know what, I'm going to go to my local meetup and I'm just going to say hi to 3 different people today. And that's all I'm doing though. And I'm going to take off. And then maybe the following month, go there and say, okay, you know what, this time I'm going to shake 3 people's hands. I'm going to exchange my LinkedIn with 2 people and then take off. And then the third time you go, set up a real strong challenge. And maybe there's a keynote talking at your local meetup or someone that's presenting, offer to meet up with them after the fact for maybe like a 15-20 minute phone call, talk cyber, exchange LinkedIn, and keep challenging yourself for new different ways to kind of connect and grow with people. Because not everyone's an extrovert, chatty Cathy like myself. Sometimes folks are more recluse and don't want to talk to anybody, which I totally understand. And there's Discord servers, there's cohorts and other communities as well that you can kind of lurk in and kind of just like chat with people here and there and kind of drop in questions here or a funny comment or a meme. But still being part of those communities, I think, is a great way to still, one, get yourself known, talk to people, find folks with similar interests, or even talk to folks that may be at organizations you wish to be working at, that you can say, hey, I'd like to talk to you for 5-10 minutes. I know you work at Microsoft. It's one of my top 5 dream places to work. Wanted just to see if we can chat for a bit.
Now, you just mentioned you had a YouTube channel, and you know, I'd love to hear more about that. But also, if people have further questions for you, where can they find you?
So my YouTube channel does have all of my like link tree info and all that jazz, but you can find me on LinkedIn. I have my Discord channel, but YouTube has all those links, and that's probably the best way to reach me.
That's awesome. Now, again, here's that one question, you know, If you could give one piece of advice to someone who is looking to start their cybersecurity career, something that you wish that every beginner knew, what would that one thing be?
Make the time in your schedule to map out what you want to do. So my journey took me about a year. I was married, 2 kids. I was still working law enforcement. I was on call all the time. I had to go to court. I worked in the traffic vehicular crime bureau. So we went out to fatal accidents, hit and runs. So my day was pretty busy. I started my day at 6 a.m. I ended about 5. I'd have dinner at 6, put the kids and the wife to bed around 7. And then I'd go back downstairs and pretty much be online doing homework or studying from like 7 to 11 and then repeat Monday through Friday. So I had a lot of dedication and hard work of what I knew I needed to do to break into this field. And so you really just need to find what motivates you, what path you're wanting to try to get into. I knew I wanted to get into blue team. So I was very blue team oriented for the training and certifications I was going for. And I set goals. I have a weird methodology that I will buy my certification, and I will set a test date, and I give myself that long to study. So I have a SSCP here coming up in about a month, and I already bought the voucher, already set the date, and I need to pass it in a month because that's my test. I need to know it because I'm taking the test in a month. And
it helps keep you accountable.
It does. And so having that time management and understanding the commitment, and if you have a family and stuff, it's hard. Like my wife knew it was going to be long nights, writing papers, doing homework, but having a supportive family or folks you can talk to about this is just also helpful because it's stressful. You're going to get tired. Burnout's a real thing, but just having good outlets and good ways to kind of de-stress and do that kind of stuff, that's, I think, the most important thing. That if I can go back, I would re-hammer and double down and just probably do a little bit more studying and to get myself ready for that first role I got into.
It's been so wonderful having you back on the channel again. You've given so much great knowledge, and we could go for a whole nother hour because we didn't even really touch on LinkedIn and just all the other things that people should be considering if they are looking to get into cybersecurity. But I really appreciate you taking the time.
Dakota, it's always a pleasure. We'll definitely have to do an AMA one of these days, or maybe like a fireside that's like a live.
Absolutely.
We'll have to do a live AMA and just like allow people to just fire questions, and we'll just go and see how long we can go for.
Absolutely. No, 100%. Again, I really appreciate you coming on the channel, and I really hope all of you enjoyed this episode. If you have any further questions, please make sure and drop them down in the comments below. And until next time, keep learning.